right. So, guys, welcome to the Exchange 2020. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Really and truly, this is something that Catherine and I, every fall we sit down and we try to plan out our sermon series for the year. We try to plan out like where do we feel like God is calling us. And this is where we felt like God was calling us to do this particular thing as a small group thing as the Exchange this year. And I hope it will bless you. We're going to have sort of different things every single week, right? We have different people presenting. So, Steven can hear me. If you happen to hate Steven this week, is be like, hey, don't worry. There's going to be somebody else next week. And on the other side, if you happen to really like Steven this week, and then next week, I'm not really feeling it, you won't have either of them the next week. So that's a part of the fun of this thing is we've found people sort of in our circles, people that we love, people that we trust, to really bring you guys some excellent content here. All of the weeks are centering around a central theme of wholeness, but it's going to look really different from week to week because this week we're talking about wholeness within ourselves. So we're talking about mental health. We're talking about what things we can do to foster good mental health. Next week we're going to be talking about relationships, and so Catherine and I are doing something I don't think risky, but we have our own couples counselor coming to present next week. She's not. Yeah, some of you know her actually because we have recommended Kathy to everybody we can who's in a marriage and just needs to talk through something because she's great. We have different people every week coming. One of the people coming is somebody that's been a spiritual director to Catherine over a lot of years, and so it's something it's close to our hearts and we feel passionate about. But I tell you what, we're going to jump into Steven since it is already 6 o'clock. Steven, it's such a joy to have you here. If you would, to start us off, say who you are, what are your credentials, why are you invited here, but also more importantly, say why are you passionate about the topic that we're talking about tonight?
Sure. Well, I was invited because Andy owes me money. So this is part of what we're trying to do. My name's Steven, and I used to be a pastor at Church of the Resurrection over in Leawood. And while I was there for about 3 years, I was the pastor for recovery ministries and for mental health ministries. So I had a chance to work with some of the most amazing people around and really had a chance to learn a lot about not only recovery, but also learn about mental health just by working alongside certain persons. And I think I'm here to be able to share some of the things I've learned, some of the things I'm learning, and start a conversation based upon some experience. So I think that's why I'm here. And my hope was to present some ideas as conversation starters, but to have time where I'm asking, and not asking, but time where I'm answering your questions during our time together. So I think that's the plan. And I'm 42 years old. I've been around as long as Gene has been going to that church. So judgmental Gene is not judgmental.
Judgmental Gene
is not judgmental. Hey, and Marcia, you kind of popped in after she said that. I'm not being mean. That's what she said.
Okay, I get it.
Okay, so I'm not just being harsh here. So, so that's who I am. And I will say this before I get started. I am a little bit biased towards Andy and Catherine. We have a lot of fun with them. Andy and I on Zoom conversations, we send chat messages to each other to have fun. So we have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff. But I will tell you that Andy and Catherine love being pastors. They love caring for you. And I promise you, like whenever you're with him, you're getting the real thing. He's a bad faker. You could win a lot of money against him in poker because he doesn't know how to lie. But I'm glad to be here with all of you tonight.
Thank you so much, Steven, man. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say tonight. You can just jump in if you want.
Sure. So I'm expecting that some of you are experiencing depression and anxiety. Some of you know somebody who you love very much who has depression and anxiety. How we talk about it, the words we use about it, can sometimes cause more harm and then good. So what I want to start off with was just what not to say. Sometimes we're kind of wondering, what do we say, what don't we? And so here's how I want to start. Depression is not the same as sadness. Depression is not the same as sadness. And I think about a number of years ago when the Chiefs were in the playoffs and they played against the Colts, and they were winning by like 80 points, and they still lost the game. And the next day, people were calling in and saying on sports radio, man, I hate that we lost. I'm so depressed right now. And the next person called and said, I'm so depressed right now. And I thought about how much damage those phone calls were making for people who actually have depression. See, the words that we should be using after the Chiefs lost, after they were up 80 points in the playoffs, was I feel crushed, I feel devastated, I'm heartbroken. All those make sense. But depression is not synonymous with really, really sad. And when we put those two things together, what we think is that the very things that get us out of feeling very, very sad should also be able to work for them getting out of being depressed. So you see how the words matter, and how when we use the words depression is the same as sadness, it creates problems. So depression is not the same as sad, and anxiety is not the same as worry. So when Andy asked all of you to share something about you that people guess wrong when they first meet you, there's probably a little bit of worry that comes up. Like, what am I going to say? How do I share something, but not too much? I don't know these people. So how do you talk in front of people? That's worry. Anxiety is not the same thing. So what we did at Church of the Resurrection, we created this program, and we started with this one sentence. And I want this to be a sentence that we start with and we'll come back to later. It's simple. If you get the science right, you can get the care right. If you get the science right, you can get the care right. Because if you don't get the science right, you could be trying to fix a problem the wrong way. So I want to ask you all. So here's my two thumbs. See these two bad boys right here? Little thumbkin here, little thumbkin over here. Where's thumbkin? Here they are. I want you to imagine what would happen if this thumb was twice the size of this thumb. If this thumb was inflamed, every one of you would say, it looks like you're hurting. You have an injury there, don't you? What happened? How does it hurt? What happened? I mean, you'd ask questions moved by compassion. If this thumb was twice the size of this thumb, none of you would expect me to type the way I normally would type, or text as fast as I normally would text. You would not think I can thumb wrestle as good as I normally can thumb wrestle if this thumb is twice the size of this thumb, right? Because you can see the inflammation, you know what's going on. The body's trying to heal the thumb. When a person has depression, their brain is actually swollen. A depressed brain is an inflamed brain, and it's measurably swollen. Like, you can actually tell where it's swollen and how it's swollen. But here's the problem. When my thumb is inflamed, I get sympathy from other people. No one accuses me of having falsified or exaggerated the inflammation of my thumb. No one will ever accuse me of that. I can point to it. See, it's inflamed. But when a person has depression, their brain is measurably swollen, and they can't point to it. People don't go up to them and say, wow, I see it. It looks like it hurts. How long has it hurt for? And because of that, a person with depression doesn't get the kindness and the compassion from other people. So the science part is really helpful, because if my thumb was inflamed, not one of you pre-COVID would say, hey, if I take you out to a movie, at the end of the movie, your inflammation will go away. None of you would do that, right? No one would say, hey, I called you twice last week. Why is your thumb still inflamed? Like, that doesn't work. And no one would say, Steven, your thumb's inflamed because you're praying the wrong way. Stephen, if you just gave your thumb over to Jesus Christ as its Lord and Savior, your thumb would stop being inflamed. Like, again, I'm just meeting you. I'm assuming you wouldn't tell me to do that with my thumb. And yet, sometimes the church does that to somebody with depression. Right? Sometimes the church tells somebody with depression, well, you just don't have the joy of Jesus. Right? You just don't have your priorities in the right place, because Jesus gives me joy. And if Jesus gives me joy and you don't have joy, well, the problem is in you. Right? So I don't know if you've heard those messages or if you shared those messages, but part of what we start off with is just the language of, if you get the science right, you can get the care right. I tell you, one of the things that was interesting to me, I did not learn this in seminary. There's a guy at the University of Kansas named Dr. Steven Blair, and he is a professor there. He wrote a book called The Depression Cure. And The Depression Cure is not the title he would have chosen. He doesn't think you can cure depression the way, sometimes we use that word, but his publishers like the term. So it's called The Depression Cure. And you can find it on Amazon right now. You can multitask and nod your head at me and find the book on Amazon, and that's okay too. But what it is, I had a chance to meet him once. And I met him, and we got permission to take his clinical work and apply it into small groups. And I oversaw training about 500 churches and oversaw about 1,500 people go through these programs, and found out that when we started treating things this way, if you get the science right, you get the care right. 90% of the people who finished the class experienced a reduction in their symptoms of depression. And 55% experienced a significant reduction where their symptoms decreased by half. There's a full program, and if any one of you find this really exciting, this might be something that you take and run with, and I can train you, and within 30 minutes you can take this and run with it. It's free and all that stuff. But anyway, there's a science behind it all. And I want to start with this. I want to start with just the science part of it. I remember one time I was doing pastoral counseling, and I was in my office, and a person with depression for 20 years came in my office. And quite often, if they didn't have a relationship with the pastor, they would direct those persons to me just because of what I was doing. And I spent the first 5 minutes sharing some of the science part about depression, about the thumb, the inflammation of the brain. And I remember watching this lady, and after I talked to her for 5 minutes, she did this. She went, she like collapsed in the semi-comfortable love seat. And I asked her what? And she said that she had had depression for 20 years. She went to a therapist every week, but this was the first time she had heard that other behaviors, other changes could actually help fight depression too. She had never heard about the scientific part of it. And she was different. Like from there on out, it was a different message than she had heard. So if I could give you the quick version, this is the 3-minute version of the class. Basically, Dr. Ilardi found the 21st century American lifestyle was conducive to depression. There's things that we do in our everyday life that cause our brains to be inflamed, measurably swollen. They did a research, and there's a tribe of people in Papua New Guinea where there's 3,000 people in the tribe, but 2 cases of moderate depression. They had a difficult life, rivaling tribes, high infant mortality rate, a difficult life. But what they found was that the way God created us to live in hunter-gatherer settings fights depression chemically. So So here are 6 things, just real quick. 6 ways to fight depression chemically. Number 1, omega-3. Omega-3, you need 1,000 milligrams of DHA a day to fight depression chemically. The quick version is 1,000 years ago, we ate a bunch of grasses and grass-fed animals. Now we eat a bunch of grains and grain-fed animals. So you can either eat a bunch of salmon, you can eat a bunch of grain-fed food, eat a bunch of vegetables, or you can eat take these Vitacost omega-3 vitamins. I'll send Andy the link to it. Basically, people who are on omega-3s are generally not taking enough for it to have an antidepressant impact. Let me ask, raise your hand if you are using omega-3s at all. Okay, there's okay. So one thing you can do is look on the back of the bottle and see how many milligrams of DHA exists. Sometimes the ones we get from Walmart are like 100 milligrams per pill, per vitamin. And you would need to do like 10 of those a day to have any antidepressant impact. The kind from Vitacost is something that it's like $22 for 3 months worth supply. So it's cheap. But that's the first one. The first one is what you eat. 1,000 years ago, our diet had omega-3s and omega-6s without the pace. And now we have a bunch of omega-6s and no omega-3s. I don't know, Deanna, if that's for you or for dogs.
It's for my dog, actually.
Oh, it is. That's what I was wondering. They're really featuring that dog, aren't they? Yeah. So you may want human vitamins for you.
Well, yeah, I was just looking to see. I give it to my dog so he'll be healthy, but then I don't take it.
Yeah. I was going to say your coat looked very shiny. All right. The other thing, who likes Diet Coke? Who drinks diet sodas? Raise your hand. Oh, there we go. Diet sodas have aspartame, and aspartame is a neurotoxin. Neurotoxins cause inflammation in the brain. I know this because the first time I met Dr. Lardy, I was drinking a Diet Coke. And he is so kind. And I always will remember him looking down at it like, yeah. So number 1, so that's the first one. Reduce aspartame, and then increase omega-3s. Number 2 is exercise. 1,000 years ago, we did a lot of things physical.
No.
Now every invention is meant to make us do less physical. There hasn't been a single invention recently that has came out that says this will help you do more work and more energy to do it. So they found that, again, 1,000 years ago, we were doing exercise to go do laundry, right? Go down to the river, scrub all that stuff. So 30 minutes of a brisk walk 3 times a week fights depression chemically. So that's number 2. Number 3, hey doggy. Number 3, sleep. 7 to 9 hours a night of sleep fights depression chemically. So 7 to 9 hours. Naps are actually bad for the brain. The reason, 1,000 years ago, when it was dark, people went to sleep or they had 12 kids. It was one or the other, right? Or they waste money on candles. So instead, right now, we might be up until 11 o'clock at night on our phones, watching a show. Personally, there are shows I will stay up an extra hour to watch that I will not wake up an hour early to watch. I don't know why. My brain just doesn't figure it out. But 1,000 years ago, we had a sleep schedule where we slept when it was dark. We woke up when the light came on. That fights depression chemically. The The fourth one is bright light. 1,000 years ago, we had the sun in our eyes all the time. 30 minutes of sunlight hitting your eyes a day fights depression chemically. And if you do it early in the morning, when you go out for a walk, it actually will help you sleep at night, because your circadian rhythms will tell you, hey, it's been a while since it's been morning. I remember it says I was outside and the sunlight was hitting my eyes. And then it helps you out that way. Social support fights depression chemically. So if we were all in the same room right now and you guys high-fived one another, your tongue will release chemicals that are stress-fighting chemicals. Basically, high-fiving and hugging people actually fights depression chemically. So here was interesting. Let me ask, can somebody answer this question? So you just unmute it and blurt it out. When you are sick, what do you want? Do you want to be with people, be away with people? What do you want within your arm's reach? When you're sick, what do you want? Somebody just unmute and blurt it out.
I want to be alone.
Yeah. Is that the same for everybody else?
Yep.
It's actually God implanting that in us. Biologically, when we're sick, God pulls us away from other people so that we don't get the whole village sick. Does that make sense? Like, so if you're contagious, God tells you to pull away from other people so you don't cough on them and get them sick, and now the whole village is wiped out because of you. So when I get sick, I want crackers, my cell phone charger, Sprite, and get away from me. Just get away. Here's the problem, though. When you have the flu and your white blood cells are rushing to heal you, your brain tells you to pull away. When your brain is inflamed, your white blood cells rush in to heal you, and your brain tells you to pull away. Why is that more harm than good if you're dealing with depression? You can unmute. I'm sorry, that's not a rhetorical question. Yeah. Why is that more harm than good when we deal with depression?
People to not be depressed.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it does the opposite, right? Some of you know this firsthand. You know there's been times that you have gone through depression, whether it's seasonal, which is about to kick in, or otherwise. And you know that even seeing people took too much energy, so you'd pull away. Or maybe you know somebody who you love, and you reach out to them, and you know they're going through perhaps clinical depression, and they're not responding to your phone calls. And it might feel like they're rejecting you. No one wants to be the pursuer and not have the person call back, right? That's not fun. But if you know it's not personal, if you know they're not pulling away because they don't like you, or they're not interested in you, or they don't need to talk to you, if you know that they're pulling away because their brain is telling them the same thing with their depression as the brain tells them and you with your flu, it just says pull away. Right? That was one of the biggest things that I had to learn, because I take things too personally too often, and there'll be people I'm pursuing, and why aren't they calling me back? And this helps me out to know, okay, their brain is telling them to pull away. So if you get the science right, you can get the care right. So the last one, and this is the sixth. I realize the 3-minute version is taking 6 minutes, so I'm a pastor. I'm doing my best to keep it short. The sixth one is what's called anti-ruminating strategies. Do you know what the word ruminate means and where it comes from? If so, just go to unmute and blurt out.
like to ruminate is to roll something over in your mind constantly, isn't it?
Yeah. Ruminate comes from the term where a cow chews on its cud. And because it has 4 stomachs, it chews it and digests it and keeps moving it over and over again. We do that too, don't you? Like sometimes a thought comes in your mind and you just can't let go of it. You chew on it for a long, long time. 1,000 years ago, we didn't have the opportunity to do that. Life was so full-bodied. You needed your attention all the time. There's a bear around you at any moment. You didn't have a time to let your mind wander. And I think when our minds wander, it hurts. So I was going to teach you guys something on how to do this for yourself. All right. It's called prayer in HD. So I'm going to ask you, if you were to say to God, "Dear God, help me not think about the color red. Help me not think about the color red. Help me not think about the color red. I beseech thee, O God, Lord of hosts, help me not think about the color red." What happens? What are you thinking about?
Red.
Red.
Math problems.
Yeah.
And also the other thing I thought is I just lost the game. You guys familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
No. If you kept on saying, "God, help me not," God, please forgive me for stepping on Andy's toes. Forgive me for stepping on Andy's toes. Help me at some point, God's going to say, "Dude, pray it once and I'm with you." Or just pray it once. So when you are experiencing acute ruminating, like you can't stop. It's late at night, whatever. The first thing you say is, "Lord, help me." That's the H. Lord, help me. The next one is called Lord, distract me. Right? If you keep on saying, "God, help me not think about how my coworker's a jerk." Lord, help me not think about how my coworker is a jerk. You're going to think about it. So in this way, you do a distraction. So I'm going to ask you, unmute yourself and answer up, what states have more vowels than consonants in their name? Name a state with more vowels than consonants.
Iowa.
Ohio.
Iowa, good. Ohio.
Connecticut.
Hawaii.
Connecticut.
Alaska's the same.
Yeah.
Yep.
Idaho?
Yes.
Okay.
Iowa?
That was already said.
Oh, somebody said that.
Alabama?
Yes.
Georgia?
Yes. And there's a few more, but I want to ask you, over the last 30 seconds, was any one of you thinking about depression or anxiety or anything else? No. In the same way that your brain can go off track and take you down a bad path, the prayer in HD can help you from going down a bad path to a neutral path. My personal story is that I cannot go from thinking today sucks, I hate today, COVID stinks. Like I can't go from a negative thought to a happy thought directly. I can't go from I feel like a loser today, I feel like a big failure, to Jesus died for my sins. Like I can't switch that quick. And a lot of other people can't, but they can go from a negative thought to a neutral thought, then to a positive thought. And if you tell somebody who's dealing with ruminating on their depression, you tell them stop doing it, it's not going to work. If you tell them to think about a scripture that makes them smile or makes you smile, that probably won't work either. But if you get them to name Nicolas Cage movies, they do 2 or 3, or name the best Beatles songs in order. If you get them to do a neutral thing, that tells their brain to get neutral, and then they can think about the positive messages. So those are the 6 things that when they are applied, I've seen that really help other people. So that's the first start. Let me ask, at any point, if you have a question, if you want to type it to me through chat, I'll address that. I'm going to talk one more point, and then I'm going to ask all of you to share what you're hearing, okay? So instead of doing the breakout rooms like we had planned, like Andy and I had planned, I'll share one more point, then we'll have you guys share what you're hearing and how this applies to you. So if you get the science right, you get the care right. You start there. Once that happens, along with that, medicine for antidepressants or anti-anxiety is okay. Like, we don't tell people who use medicine for high blood pressure that they're cheating. We don't tell them that they're weak in their spirit because they're taking, low blood pressure medicine or medicine for their diabetes. So we just need to take away that shame. Dr. Stephen Alardi, his wife is a psychiatrist. Take that back. She's a pharmacist. And she would tell people that if all you're doing is just taking the pill, it's not going to do everything. Just like low blood pressure pills aren't the only thing the doctor tells you to do. It's take the low blood pressure pill, reduce red meat, exercise more, that kind of stuff. So we would tell people that if you're on antidepressants, do not change them unless you have a doctor telling you to change them. So don't take what I just told you and say, hey, these 6 things work, I'm going to do these instead. That could be really dangerous. So don't do that. So a couple things. So spiritual messages. One is, again, if you get the science right, you get the care right. So how do you get the care right? Number 1 is you fight the shame. And the way you fight shame is by providing compassion and light. You take a petri dish worth of shame, you put some compassion in it, put some light into it, and it will defeat the shame. One of the best things you can ever say to somebody are the words, me too. Right? It takes away all the judgment. There are 40 million adults in the United States right now that have anxiety, 40 million who have depression. That's the population of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Colorado, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, I think I already said that, combined. Doesn't matter what you think about the Big 12. There's some good people who live in those states. So if any one of you is dealing with depression or anxiety, you're not alone. You're not alone. And just because you have depression or anxiety doesn't make you a bad daughter or a bad son, sister, brother, husband, wife, mom, dad. Sometimes what depression does, it means that if I'm bad in one area, the badness spills out into every hat that you wear. But that's a lie. So I want to tell you, just from me to you, that you're not alone. So the first thing we do is we fight the shame and we talk about it. We do what Andy's doing and Catherine's doing and naming this as a topic worth a Wednesday night. What an amazing thing would happen if the church was able to give kindness and healing in an area where the church is often added to the problems. So number 1, you fight the shame. The second one is you see the beauty. When a person has depression or anxiety, they often would give their right arm to get rid of it. And no one wants, who wants crippling anxiety or depression? Raise your hand. Anybody? Right. In my experience, a lot of the people who have depression or anxiety feel like they're doing life wrong. Sometimes they think God's punishing them, and we know that God doesn't do that, but they feel it. Sometimes the heart thinks things that the mind doesn't think. And we've all done that too, right? In my experience, though, the people with depression and anxiety, they have a depth of spiritual life that is often unmatched by other people. So if Charles had some saltine crackers and just Jeff had no saltine crackers, sorry, just Jeff, no saltine crackers for you. And if I had a glass of water and Charles has eaten all the saltine crackers, which person desires the water the most? Yeah, it's Charles.
Yeah.
Who appreciates the water the most?
Charles.
Who may even love the water the most? It's Charles, right? In my experience, people with depression or anxiety, they are so thirsty for God. They may not experience what other people describe, but God's right there with them. Right? There's a beauty to it. I heard a British guy say this. He said, what if the absence of God and not the having of God was the truest religious experience? What if it was the longing for God and not the having that was the condition of a true soul that was alive? That's just, if he didn't have a British accent, I probably would not have remembered that. But British accents have a way of sounding really smart. Basically, he said, and this is, what if God was not the oasis in the middle of our desert? What if God was the desert in the middle of our oasis? And I think about that with people with depression and anxiety, and their longing is so beautiful. So if you are having depression or anxiety and you're longing for like a closeness with God, what a beautiful place to be in. And just identify it. The third and final part of getting the care right is just to give hope, right? Hope looks different, but basically what hope is attachment to the Easter resurrection story. That no matter what Saturday looks like, there's a Sunday that follows. And people with depression and anxiety, they may not feel this way themselves. So what I found helpful at times is to tell them, listen, you may not believe it, but right now I just need you to believe that I believe it. Just, can you believe that I believe it? And if you can believe that I can believe it, we can start from there. Part of the brain that is inflamed is the left frontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that deals with motivation. The reason why people who are depressed don't feel motivation is not because they're lazy. Again, that's spiritualizing and moralizing the symptoms. See how that would cause problems? But what we can do as those who love people with depression and anxiety, we can be people who help them with their left frontal cortex. We can stand next to them and say, I'll go for a walk with you. I'll cut out Diet Coke with you. I'll have sunlight with you. So let me pause there. This is time just to open up. What are you hearing? And the rest of our time together is walking through let me ask this question. What's a new idea here that is helpful and why? What's a new idea you heard here that is helpful for your setting, your family, you as a person, your church? What's a new idea here that is helpful for you and why?
I think for me, one of the things that I have a hard time with with depression and anxiety, and I have health issues that complicate that, is the feeling of guilt. of feeling like I can't be where I should be, doing what I should be doing. I'm not enough, that sort of thing. And then some of the things that you have said, though, lead me to believe that, yeah, okay, I have a chemical problem. I know that, and I understand that. So I need to be a little bit more forgiving to myself. And I can start that by asking God to help me too. And I mean, I've heard that before. I've felt that before, but to put it into those words in that way, I think it's really helpful. And I'm going to try to remember that.
That's really wonderful, Susan. I think if you get the science right, you can get the self-care right too.
Yeah.
Right. Just like you wouldn't be angry at yourself for not being able to get your thumb uninflamed, right? You would give yourself better self-care and kindness. That's wonderful, Susan.
Perfect.
One of the places I served was Buckland, Kansas, and they had a drug and alcohol treatment program there. And I can't remember what the name of the place was. But one of the things the guy stressed was that alcoholism was an allergic reaction. And this guy was able to treat and get people into recovery that had failed at several different programs previously. And I always thought the one thing that made that work was if the person stopped blaming themselves for it, for their problem, that then they could begin to work on the problem and seek and obtain a resolution to the problem. But as long as they were into this self-loathing, self-blaming format, nothing worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
That I thought that was a key element in his program.
Mm-hmm. In the Bible, when Adam and Eve named the animals, naming is an act of power. Right, you name your dogs, you name your kids, and when you name something, you have power over it. In your situation, the people going through alcoholism, being able to name what's going on makes you feel like you have some power over it. You're able to say, "Okay, this is what's going on." It's not all moralized language. It's, my brain's acting this way. There's a chemical imbalance. There's power in that. Thank you for sharing that, Charles.
I feel like this has been really timely. I almost didn't come because I got some really bad news yesterday about one of my students. He actually he committed suicide yesterday morning. And so, and I've always kind of struggled because like I said in my introduction, I'm bright Bonnie. Like I can't think of a time where I've been in a place so dark. And it's always been really hard for me to try and relate to people going through depression because like, I try not to just say like, buck up. Like, I know you can't just say, buck up, get out of it. Like, I know that's not a thing. But for me, I really needed to hear, like, I love all the things that you just said. And for me, it makes me feel like, okay, I can't talk about Jesus in front of my students, but I have to go tomorrow and tell 2 classes that he's not coming back. And like, and so I just like, here are some things like that we can do to like, make sure that we're staying healthy. And like, I'm not even sure I'm going to teach. I think I might even bring some of this to them because a lot of them are struggling. And it's like, so I'm really, God told me to come. I was like, I don't know if I want to come. I'm like, just kind of in this bad headspace, but I'm glad that I did. And I think that God really used this to give me some perspective.
Hey, Bonnie, what was your student's name?
His name is Gabe Bass.
Gabe. Yeah. And Annie is going to be there, and what a good pastor you guys have. I've had a chance to do some funerals for those who have committed suicide, and one of the most reoccurring themes has been that oftentimes the person who commits suicide, they didn't want to die, they just didn't know how to live. And sometimes they had a pain they didn't have the words for. Sometimes, they had the support system around them. They just had some reason where they couldn't believe it. There's people with amazing parents and teachers and friends who have committed suicide. And a lot of times we wonder, why didn't I know? If I knew more, I would have done more. Once a person decides that they want to commit suicide, they get very secretive, and they get very good at hiding their symptoms and their decision because they don't want other people to stop them. So if I just offer this to you, if you didn't know it was this bad, it's likely has nothing to do with your perceptiveness or how attentive or how concerned or how much you love being a teacher or anything else like that. A lot of times it's just when a person has made that decision, they've just become very, very good at faking it so no one will interrupt it. So I'm sorry, Bonnie.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Stephen, would you mind just lifting up a prayer for Gabe and his family?
Yeah, let's do that. The scriptures tell us you are near the brokenhearted. You are near now. Gabe's decision was not your plan for his life. That you're disappointed. This is not what you had planned. You had a long life that you had hoped for him, of enjoyment with you and service to you. And yet we know that you do not judge any of us based upon our worst moment, but by your son's best. Hold Gabe close to you. Give him the kindness and the tenderness that he felt was lacking in this world. And may those who call upon you find in you the power and the strength to look at one another for comfort and to fight the shame that comes along with mental illness and suicide, so that your goodness will fall upon all who hear the news and who call out to you. May Bonner Springs, may Bonnie, may the people around Gabe Bass's family be an ever-present source of support. We thank you for your nearness, and for the life of Gabe Bass, we give you thanks. Amen. Bonnie, well, thank you for sharing that. At some point, this topic tends to go to that direction. And yet, not everybody with depression has suicidal ideation. And not everybody who commits suicide has depression. Right? Sometimes something else was the active part, right? Thank you. What else? When you think about other people in your life, how does this relate to them? How do you see the connections?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of goes along these lines. I interact with people who have suffered great loss, and a lot of us have had losses in our life. And you made the extrapolation between the hurt thumb, and the sore on your thumb. And I can relate to the swollen thumb because I've had a hangnail before on my thumb, and it really hurt. So I can extrapolate that to my swollen thumb. I don't know how to extrapolate depression and anxiety. The only thing I can get, you're right, it's not the sadness or the devastation, which we all suffer with loss, but every once in a while, those normal feelings of impending doom or second guessing yourself that won't stop. I guess that's the hangnail that I can extrapolate from. I don't have a better way to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people that I see have gone through the loss of a loved one or a suicide person or a long extended illness or a sudden death, they all have that grief in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, grief in itself isn't, but grief that they're not able to get through can move in that similar direction.
Yeah, I think that's well spoken. I think grief is not the same as depression. Being really sad isn't the same as depression, right? I think though, a hurt, it's kind of like water in a bird bath. You know, the longer the water stays in the bird bath, the longer, you know, it starts to have like a chemical change, doesn't it? And I think if we're dealing with a grief and we haven't been able to deal with it in healthy ways by talking to folks, whether it's a pastor, a therapist, a loved one, to think through it, it's very likely that grief turns into depression. And grief isn't just grief of losing a loved one. Grief is our reaction to any loss of a job, loss to a season of life. You know, I mean, it's, you mentioned anxiety. Anxiety is part of my story. And I just thought I was a worry wart. But I didn't worry as much as my mom, so that was good. And she didn't worry as much as her mom. So compared to my grandma, I'm pretty even keel. Like, no, anxiety is the fear. And this is what the pending doom you're referring to. Anxiety is the full body response of the sympathetic response system that kicks in when there's a threat. And if there's a big bear, my sympathetic response system kicks in, my pupils dilate to look for the bear, my blood rushes to my hands for fighting, to my feet for flight, my breathing gets really shallow. The problem is 1,000 years ago, we would see a bear, but that's the only thing we would see. The rest of the day, the rest of the week, we're fine. Now we live with this fear. You know, it may not be actual bears, but it's, I wonder if my boss saw me show up 5 minutes late. I wonder if my boss is upset that I had to leave to do something with my kids today because they got sick. I wonder if my neighbors are upset that I didn't cut the grass yet, and now our grass is too long. I wonder if I'm good enough for my in-laws. You know, it's all these fears. And anxiety is, again, the belief that there's just a bear. There's always a bear, right? And this is my own personal opinion. I've heard somebody say this with more clinical background, that sometimes depression isn't a different branch than anxiety. In some cases, depression is the continuation of anxiety. That if you live your life afraid that there's always a bear, at some point you stop thinking about how big the bear is. You start thinking about how small you are. And isn't the feeling of being small in the presence of big problems, isn't that depression? I mean, isn't that a symptom or a description of depression? I think you start off with the science, and then you have an opportunity to talk about what the Holy Spirit does to address some of the issues about power. And no matter how big the bears are, there's a God who lives inside you who helps you fight them. Other questions? Anything else when you think about how this applies to your life and the people that you love?
I guess I have a question. Like, how do you, and I know that like from kind of stuff you've talked about, I know I haven't always approached it correctly, but like, how do you try and help a person who seems really resistant to help?
Yep. You have to decide how close you are to them, right? If you're really close, you can be a little more of a butthead. You can be more of a, here's the deal, like, you may not want my help, but I'm in this with you. We've been friends for 20 years, and I'm in this with you. You can mention the left frontal cortex thing. You can say something like, I'm not interested in helping you. I'm interested in you and I getting healthy together. Sometimes that helps. Then they don't feel like they're receiving your help, but they're actually giving help back to you. This is a good idea. Go on to Google. I'm going to type it in right here. There's what we did in our classes. This is what came from Dr. Lardy. So it's called the Burns Depression Checklist or the Burns Anxiety Inventory. Basically, you can go on to Google right now, Google Images, look these up, and they'll give you 25 questions. Each of the questions you can rate between a 0 and a 4. Like one question is like crying spells. And you're asking about the last week, how much are you having crying spells? 0 gives you 0 points. 4, meaning all the time, gives you 4 points. And that gives you an actual metric for how depressed or how much anxious symptoms you have at the time. One thing you can do is ask a person to fill that out. And then they can look at that and it tells you what a 30 means, what a 60 means. When I tell you that the 90% effective and 55% significantly effective, it was because every week we have them fill out this survey. And there's people who I have seen who are coming to the loved ones class, and they're only there because their loved one has depression, but their scores were actually higher. They were completely unaware that depression or anxiety was part of their story. And so sometimes something like that, Bonnie, allows somebody to look at the numbers and realize, I might need help here. Also, pulling them by the ear works too. I've seen that be successful sometimes. How this, one more question, Max, and then Andy's got it. Andy's going to wrap us up. Any final question? Okay. Let me just say this then. For some of you, I didn't get a chance to talk to, for Katie, Marcia, Michelle, Patrick, and Michelle, Deanna, Judy, Emma, I think. Some of your names are getting cut off. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. You're in very good hands with Andy and for Catherine. But there's anything I can do to help out, pass it on. If anything I was missing, I can do a better job of answering. I'd love to be able to help out. In many times, in many places, you guys are going to be the front lines of those who help out. So we'll get back to this. If you get the science right, you get the care right. If you don't get the science right, they don't care about your care. But once you get the science right, tell them there is no shame, that they are not alone. Tell them there's beauty in their current state, and then tell them that there's hope. And those 3 things will be a great way of getting the care right. And when possible, walk the walk with them. So thank you for your time. I'll let Andy wrap us up and give us marching orders.
Yeah. Steven, thank you so much, man. That is just great. I learned a whole lot tonight, which is awesome. Like, that's great. So if you guys, I know it's kind of weird. Everybody unmute all at once and just give Steven a hand. Can you guys do that and then say thank you? Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a couple words. With this whole thing that we're doing right now is centered around wholeness. It helps us to figure out the ways in our lives we can be changed, that we can invite God in, but also it gives us the tools to be able to help other people along in their journeys too. And I think tonight is helpful, probably for all of us in one of those 2 ways or both of them. So God bless you, Steven, for being so faithful to where God is calling you, exploring this path, and then just being so kind to just come and share this with our group here. I'm gonna remind you guys next week, back at the same time, same Zoom link, 5:30 to 7, and we will be talking about relationships, like partnered relationships, husband, wife, that sort of a deal. Even if you're not currently in one of those, will still be some good advice on how to navigate relationships, current and in the future. So I invite you guys to come back for that. And besides that, I'm just going to close this in prayer. So I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. God, I thank you so much for this opportunity to be together. God, for getting good practical advice on things that we don't often talk about enough in church. And God, I thank you for all of the knowledge and the wisdom that Stephen brought in his presentation here. God, I know that there are people on this call and people for sure who on this call know people impacted by depression and anxiety. And God, we just pray that we would continue to be open to you. God, you have made us fearfully and wonderfully, and as much as we can work towards wholeness in our lives and invite other people down that journey too, God, you smile at that, and so I pray that we all just continue down that journey. And God, I pray a special blessing to each and every person here who has been impacted personally or through a friend, God, and that are dealing with depression and anxiety. God, just let them know that you are near to them right now, even if when it's hard to feel. God, we thank you and we love you. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Guys, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week, if not before.